Okay, hi everyone. My name is Jason Lee. My legal name is Xiang Lee, and I'm from Northwood High School. And today I will be presenting what I designed and engaging the game design for education purpose of K to 12 by integrating mathematics into game mechanics. So specifically, I designed a game called Math Night, which is a novel educational game that embedded mathematical principles directly into the gameplay. And that investigates how integrating math into game mechanics using a roguelike framework can overcome common challenges such as math anxiety and disinterest. And I developed that using C# with the game engine Unity. And I also have other specific features that helps with the purpose of education. And so for my introduction, I have like these quotes from other sources that I've read. For example, some of the heaviest criticisms of mathematics teaching and learning is the reliance on drill and practice as a pedagogy. That is what my game also relies on, practicing on and on with the roguelike framework. And then also have the below quotes that shows the importance of mathematics and practice and shows how game development can help significantly in math education. And to achieve these goals, I conducted some studies and learning on how virtual environments can just be as effective as hands-on learning, which is why I went on and designed this game. And then I'm gonna first talk about some challenges I had while designing the game process. First is computer inaccuracy, because for mathematics, we want precision and mathematics accuracy. But for computer, it cannot store infinite digits. For example, like one simple example is 1 divide 3. The number turns into 0.333, with 3 being the decimals repeating, right? But computers cannot store infinite digits, so it has to round. Then if you do 0.333 times 3 again, it might give 0.999 to some digit, but it does not go back to 1. And to avoid that, how I eventually solved this problem is I used like a token in the algorithm, which keeps the expression in a fraction and does not round it to decimals. So all the health calculation is done by using strings and fractions. And then another problem is math-based mechanics might not be as engaging for students who aren't naturally drawn to math. And how I overcame that is by artwork and the game design itself and making the game appealing. So the math is integrated into the narrative, making it feel like a natural part of the adventure. We might all played some math games before when we were young, but most of the math games I see on market are like they let you play a game and then the math is entirely unrelated with the game, which is they pause the game and then they present you some problem and you have to answer it correctly in order to proceed. And then the third challenge for my game is randomness, because my game contains many possible rewards for the player generated randomly to provide the excitement of legendary rewards and also roguelike in general, because randomness is very important as the core. But to have this randomness, I need a very big pool of rewards. So I need to avoid like the big time to sync in code for each individual reward. I could implement like a base class that takes a parameter for each new reward card to diversify their effect by using the same script. And then my solution to the problem that most games on the market are not actually purposeful for education, I designed this game Math Night with Unity. So this is my game loops image, which shows like the first loop is defeating enemies, gaining resource, level up, and getting stronger, and defeating enemies again. That is the smallest loop, what we do each turn by turn. And then the second loop is a bigger loop. So every time we defeat a level, we defeat the boss, we can gain a new one, which is mathematical operation, such as plus, minus, times, divide. And then the logic of the game is using the operation to kill enemies. The enemy's health would be like any number, and then you can do an operation to it to decrease the health or increase the health. And eventually, when you get the enemy's health to 0, the enemy dies. So that is the second game loop. Once you encounter new types of enemies, you defeat a new level, you will gain a new operation. And you can get familiar with that new operation and get better at it. And then the biggest loop is to progressing through the game story, the plot of the game. And then one key mechanics of my game is the player's house and the enemy's house are all represented using strings. So they wouldn't die unless their house reaches 0. And that creates a lot of space for creativity, which allows negative house and fraction house. For example, in the first level, the player only has the subtraction sword, and then the enemies have only the house with natural numbers, such as 1, 2, 5, 29. And natural numbers are all positive numbers except 0. Okay, so if the enemy has a house number 5, then the player has to count exactly. The first level teaches natural counting, which is the most basic of mathematics. So if the enemy has a house of 5, and then you do -3 to it, which is subtraction with level 3, and then the enemy's house will be 2. And then if you do -3 again, you miscount it, and the enemy house will be -1. And that will not be killable in level 1 since you do not have the plus operation. So that teaches the player to count carefully, time by time. And the player doesn't need to worry about not beating the game because it's a roguelike game, so it's designed to be hard. And you have to try again and again to get better at it and to know the mechanics. And then the reward screen will pop up after the player kills an enemy every time. And then the player will interact with the reward system to get stronger and progress through the game. Basically, there are 4 weapons in a game: subtraction sword, addition axe, multiplication mace, and division dagger. Let me find a picture. Yeah, you can see like the 4 weapon slots on the bottom. The other 3 are locked, but you can see the first one is the subtraction sword. And what these weapons do is the subtraction sword, it has a level on top, if you could see. It is at level 4 right now in the picture. So the subtraction sword, by its name, is subtraction. If you use the subtraction sword to hit an enemy, it will decrease the enemy's health by the amount of its level. So a level 4 subtraction sword would do -4 damage. And then for addition axe, by its name, it does addition. It does addition by the exact amount of its level. And all the levels are integers. So all subtraction, addition, multiplication, and division will do by integer amounts. So for example, plus, it will be +1, +2, +5. And then times, it will be ×2, ×3, ×5. Divide also, like divide 3, divide 4. And then let's move back to the levels. So after level 1, the player defeats the boss and enters a new level. The player gains the addition axe, which allows them to add to the enemy's health. And why would they want to add? Because enemy's health can also be negative numbers. It only dies when it reaches exactly 0. So the enemy health are now the set of integers, which includes negative numbers, such as -25, -1, 6, 10, which also includes positive numbers. And this level introduces the idea of negative numbers, allowing the players to master subtraction and addition with both positive and negative integers. And the boss in this level has the ability to multiply the little enemy's health, which introduces the multiplication operation. And after the player defeats level 2's boss and enters level 3, the player will gain the multiplication mace. And then this is the real part with which actually the game gets hard mathematically. The enemy's health are now rational numbers. Rational numbers are all numbers that could be represented using a fraction, which also includes integers. For example, 5 can be represented as 5/1. And rational numbers are just fractions and integers. It is, example, like 5, -1/2, 2/3, 229. Those are all rational numbers. And this level introduces the idea of fractions, which promotes the player to use multiplication operation to simplify fractions into integers. Because, for example, if an enemy's health is 1/2, since your subtraction and addition can only do integer damage, 1/2 minus 1 will be -1/2. And then +1 will be 1/2 again. So you can never get the enemy health to 0 if you do not get rid of the fraction part. That's why the player must be familiar with the multiplication damage. Yeah, and here I gave an example of 69/5. If the player, this is also considering the order of operation. For example, 69/5. If the player just multiply 5 because they see 5 without deep consideration, the enemy health would be 69, which is hard to defeat because you have to minus a huge amount, 69. Instead, the player will learn to perform minus operation first. For example, a minus 13 would make the fraction 4 over 5. And now if we multiply 5, the enemy health will be resolved to 4. By considering the order of operation, the player reduces the required minus from 69 to 17, because 17 is 13 plus 4. And the boss in this level has the ability to divide the health of the player, which introduces the division operation. So in level 4, the player gains the division dagger, which can divide the enemy's health. And now enemy health is still rational numbers, there is no change. However, the enemy health increases significantly in number, because with division, we can defeat like very high number healths just in a few steps. For example, the number 999 can be defeated within 6 operations with divide. You divide 3, divide 3, divide 3. That 999 divide 3 is 333, and then divide 3 again is 111. And then you divide 3 again, I believe it's 37, I think. Yeah, 37. And then you do minus 2, it becomes 35. And then you divide 5, it's 7. And then you just do minus 7 and it reaches 0. So 999, it could approach 0 in 7 steps with division dagger. That shows the power of division. And then as the enemy house increases significantly in number, the player has to know how to use division, or else they couldn't pass the level, because minus is just too trivial when you reach the division level. And then enemy house will also involve more advanced fractions with multiples of prime factors, such as 1 over 90. The player is not going to have a level 90 multiplication maze, but they can still defeat the enemy. Why? Because 90 is not a prime number. They can simplify it by multiplying 2, multiplying 3, multiplying 3, and multiplying 5, because 90 can be broken down into these prime factors, which are small numbers. This scratches on the concept of prime factorization. The player will gain significant practice of basic arithmetic operations and calculations after finishing all 4 levels. And this is also adaptive learning. As you know, you progress through each level through a roguelike framework. You're not afraid to fail, because if you fail, you can just always go back and then hit retry and do it again. And this adaptive learning creates a personalized study journey according to different individuals, which could have a significant impact on one's learning experience and gains. And this is an overview of my game and solution. So basically, you have the in the top image, you can see right here I have a start screen, which is how my start screen looks like. You can click play, help, or quit. And then once the players are promoted to click help first, because it helps them enter this screen. That explains the whole mechanics I just did of my game, which is the 4 weapons and how the enemy doesn't die even if it's negative health or fraction health. And then the movement is WASD, and the arrow keys to switch the levels of your weapon. And then you defeat, and then once you enter the game, it shows the game screen of like the enemies such as dinosaurs, and then there's walls, and then you can walk. It's also a turn-based game. So if you don't perform anything, you don't attack, you don't move, the enemy is not gonna move or attack you. I think this is very crucial to math, is giving the player enough time to think about what they're gonna do. And then for the game, after the game thing, if you defeat an enemy, you enter the reward scene, which gives you 3 random reward cards with 3 different rarity. The common is the most common, 60%, and then rare is 30%, and then the gold one right here on the right, that is legendary, which is only 10%. And this says, an integral part of my game is the way the player and enemy health is calculated, which I already said before. And it doesn't round, which is very good. And I did that by implementing an expression tree, which is a binary tree, also with the token to make sure the fraction works. And this concept, I think, is pretty unique and essential to the game, because I do not see any other mathematics calculation in game design using this idea. And here's an example of the screenshot of code, which I use the postfix and prefix token to manipulate the fractions calculation. And also I calculate the health using strings. And then you can read the below saying how specifically I did that. And then the next component in my project is a reward system for the player. Every time the player defeats an enemy, they are presented with a random chance of rewards based on the condition of the game and random models. There are 3 different rewards. Each tier has a different list of possibilities, which I think I talked about: common, rare, and legendary. And then I also took into account important factors like the player's current health, potion value, and level. And this makes the rewards more interesting and dynamic. For example, in the first level, the player did not unlock the other 3 weapons, the addition axe, multiplication mace, and division dagger. Then the only upgradation reward they will get is upgrade for the subtraction sword. That is how I manipulate the rewards pool based on the player's current level and then his health potion. And that is also a important component of roguelike, because every time the player restarts the game, they're going to have a different experience. And that is a screenshot of the rewards. And the second picture is the code of the rewards. I have 3 tiers, and I manipulate the possibility using a weight. So how I did it is I gave tier 1 rewards a weight, tier 2 rewards a weight, and then tier 3 rewards a weight. The good thing about weight is you don't have to worry about the percentage, like whether they don't add up to 100 or not. So just a bigger number implies a bigger chance of getting that. So how I did that is I had a total weight, which is all 3 weight plus together, and then I generate a random integer between that range. And then everything between the range of 0 to the tier 1 weight, it would all be tier 1 rewards. And then everything between the range of tier 1 weight to tier 1 plus tier 2 weight, it will be tier 2 rewards. And then anything between the range of tier 1 plus tier 2 weight to tier 1 plus tier 2 plus tier 3 weight, it will be generated as a tier 3 reward. And also an important reward I had, is the potion reward. So for example, on this screen, you can see that it says get a potion that increases your health by 2. And then that would increase your potion number. There's a number on the potion. So how the potion works is the player click H, then the player can drink the potion, and then the player's health will be added by the amount shown on the potion. And then there's a very interesting reward card I designed, which is called manipulate the strength of the potion. And this might be a little bit confusing to the player at first glance, but once the player plays multiple times, they will know how it works. So how it works is basically once you click that reward, manipulate the strength of your potion, it spawns the potion right in front of you, moves it from the bottom left corner to the grid right in front of you, and then you can attack the potion with the weapons. And you might wonder, why do you want to attack the potion with the weapons? Well, you could do plus and multiplication to make the potion number a really big number, and then drink it. It would increase your health by a lot. But there's also one interesting gameplay that not many players think of, but I tried with my friend, which is using division once you get to manipulate the strength of your potion. So for example, if your potion is 10, you can do divide 3 to make your potion 10 over 3. And by drinking that potion, will make your health into a fraction. Which again, fraction is also hard to kill by enemies. Oh, the enemies' attacking logic is they would detect the player's health. For example, if the player's health is positive, they would deal minus damage. If the player's health goes to negative, they would deal addition damage. And then if the player's health is a fraction, they will do multiplication damage. However, the multiplication is not exactly the denominator of the player. So it won't just cancel out the player's denominator. It has a chance to, but not directly. So for example, if the player is 22 over 3, they might have a chance to shoot times 3, but they also might have a chance to shoot like times 4. And then once the player sees times 4, they can just let the times 4 hit them, and then that would increase their health by a lot. And another screen to be implemented is in the future, which I didn't have time to in the previous game, is to implement a count that would count the times the players uses his attacks. And I think this will be a great addition to the game because it will help the player to be constantly challenged, which is a key to learning. It will also be technically hidden to the player, which will make them learn without knowing they are learning. And then below is a screenshot of the loose page. There's gonna have a personal best on the top right corner, which says how many hits you took. And I think that would be also encouraging the players to challenge themselves. And then to test out, after I created the game, to test it out, I had some investigations, such as, I hosted a summer camp inviting 123 participants who are currently enrolled in elementary school in Irvine, like from Northwood Elementary and other elementary schools, and also some after-school programs, such as the Rainbow Sunrise. And then I was able to get 123 participants, which was a bit of challenging to me, but it worked out at the end. And then the way we collected data was asking each of them how would they describe their feelings about math. And I asked before playing my game and after, and analyze it like below. And the first set of data is before they played my game. And we can see, the volume of the word implies how many times the word is said. So we can see boring, hard is a lot, and maybe also fun, because some kids, they do love math, which I think is really great. And also difficult, numbers interesting, challenging, words like that. And I think this is a good way to visualize data. It's a motive for me to know what players are thinking about my game and how their perception of math might change throughout playing. And then this is the second set of words I collected after they played my game, which the biggest numbers are rewarding, awesome, maybe a bit boring, but they think and learn and nice, and also still a little bit of hard, because I do consider my game to not be easy. It's a little bit challenging for players. And this is strong evidence of how my game Math Night changed the perspective of students on math. The word shows a clear contrast with the word cloud in figure 9, indicating that a shift of tone from negative to positive. And this result shows on how engaging learning by integrating math into game mechanics instead of inserting math like advertisements can induce the game-like interest natural of the math, generating an exciting learning experience for kids in elementary schools. And then the second experiment I want to test out is if the game actually helps with the practice of mathematics. It's crucial that this game is not just for fun, but also has real impact, right? So I invited some students to participate in my organized summer camp again, which is I said above. And then I also had a quick test on their simple knowledge. I recorded the accuracy, the time and accuracy they took to answer like some simple math questions, just calculations. And then it progressed. And after they played my game, I redo that test, and I found that the results were way better. They did it faster and with higher accuracy. And this is my data collection plan for the future if I want more data. And then another thing that I think my game is really good on math education compared to others is that the game mechanics we focused on is the most basic calculations. The 4 operation calculations, plus, minus, times, divide. I think no matter, especially in elementary school, that is very important. But no matter in which level of mathematics, calculations is always essential. Having a faster and more accurate calculation speed would be a beneficial of a lifetime. So that is something I think really crucial to my game design also. And then some related works I researched on is use different methodologies. For example, the first methodology I saw is video simulation recall, and that shows the importance of an ongoing learning principle within the context of mathematics education. And then I also implemented that ongoing learning principle with the progressive of each level. However, the research paper I read says a sample in 2012 of video game teaching mathematics aimed to target the new generation of digital native motivations to play, but learning was limited because it was possible to just trial and error. I think it was probably like a multiple choice questions. which is not the case in my game. My game is just game mechanics that uses mathematics. And then the second methodology I saw was that they concluded some positive effects and purpose of some digital gaming that resulted in positive education effects. And that team, I think it was a team from Columbia College, undergraduates, and their research was on the positives of game designed for education. And they focused specifically on analyzing 3 games. Oh, actually 2 games, yeah. The first game is the Dinner for Dogs, which is a role-play interactive game where the player assumes the role of a dog caretaker, and then the task is feeding the dog with a certain amount of food with limited resources. However, this game is pretty boring due to the flow. The reward gets correctly feeding the dog is only the dog being happy. Like it just literally says the dog is happy, and then you succeed. And then you move on to the next day and feed it again. And I think that might be not as attractive and boring as my game, because my game avoids that with the reward system that uses randomness that provides excitement, and also the roguelike framework, which is giving you feedback. Every time you defeat an enemy, you get stronger yourself. You can see your progress, and you can defeat bigger enemies with bigger health. And then the second game the Columbia team investigated was the last chip. It was a puzzle game with the objective to take the last chip under various rules. It is very similar to the main game, which is like the game that you pull matches and then everyone wants to get the last one. And that aims to exercise mathematical reasoning, which I get. And then this game has structure. However, this game structure and objective limits the thing that students can learn from it, because the main game aren't a major subject in the school. And again, it also lacks motivation due to the lacking reward system, because the main game is just pulling stuff and you try to pull the last one. There is a game theory related to it. However, people don't learn it in elementary school, and it is more highly related to number theory, which doesn't really help with the everyday school math. And then my method avoids all these with fundamental arithmetic operations, as I said before, is it would clearly benefit students, because no matter which level of mathematics you are in, calculation speed and accuracy will always help along the way. And then the third methodology I thought was conducted on a role of computer games in education that uses 3 different types of research to analyze how computer games in education can develop. And then the first type of research is value-added research. It suggests 5 promising features to include in educational game computers, such as modularity, personalization, pre-training, coaching, and self-explanation. I think self-explanation is also an important component in my game, because I have the instructions all listed in the help screen, but most players actually don't get all the game mechanics in that one, and they have to figure it out through playing, and that is the process of self-taught, self-explanation. And then the second type of research is cognitive sequence research that suggests 2 promising approaches to cognitive training with computer games. The first one is using first-person shooter games to train precaution attention skills, and using spatial puzzle games to train 2-dimensional mental ration skills. However, this is not directly related to math, but I think this shows how game design and game development could also yield promising results for math education. And then the last type of research is media comparison research that suggests 3 promising areas where game may be more effective than conventional media: science, mathematics, and second language learning. However, it says that future research is needed to pinpoint the cognitive, motivational, affective, and social process that underlies learning with educational computer games. And then this article was published in 2019. So by that time, computers weren't as prevalent in education as nowadays. I think nowadays there are some good games out there that pinpoints the cognitive and social process that underlies learning. So all these 3 methodologies above address math education in the gaming industry. He tried to accomplish an optimal outcome of integrating games integrating games with math. However, the attempts were either too boring on the game side or too trivial on the math education side. And the third methodology, which I just said, it provides guidance on how to create a good math game, but it didn't actually provide a product that meets its own criteria. It only says that future research might be done, and my research is probably the future research. And my project did the most for basic arithmetic operations, as I already said before, that it's going to be very beneficial in all phases of math. And that brings us to our conclusions. The strengths of my game is the high integration of mathematics with the game mechanics. I just want to reiterate that, which provides the player with a virtual learning experience that reinforces knowledge. The roguelike gameplay encourages repetition and practice, which is also an important factor of solidifying knowledge. And I think that is a pretty unique factor. I haven't seen another math game on the market that has this high level of integration of mathematics into game mechanics as my game. However, there are still some limitations. For example, the artwork of the game aren't super ideal. The animations aren't that appealing, but I think it could definitely be improved. The sprites, I got them from the Unity asset store. I think I could definitely draw my own sprites with some aesthetics. That is what I'm working on. And also another limitation might be the requirement of some patience. It is a turn-based game, so players can't bash through. I know that some kids like to play action games. That's what I heard from the feedback during my experiment. But I think math has to be related to turn-based because you have to have the time to think about it. And then for future plans, I encourage more strategic thinking and promote deeper learning to introduce an attack counter that tracks how often the player uses the weapon operation, which is the one I said in the before screen. In the you leave, we're going to count the personal best, which is how many hits you use. Now, I want to implement that because it would discourage the overuse through thoughtful gameplay, discourage overuse of the subtraction when you could do division to decrease the amount of hits you need. And then additionally, I also want to implement adaptive AI that analyzes the player performance to generate enemies that exploit their weakness, offering targeted practice without overtly signaling it, making learning seamless and engaging. For example, if the player struggles a lot with fraction enemies, maybe the AI could detect it by their average time spent on a fraction enemy. And then also their operations used on a fraction enemy might not be ideal, and the AI might be able to detect that and generate more fraction health enemies accordingly. And finally, I want to expand the arsenal with new weapons based on exponential and radical operations, such as the squares, a cube, a square root, a cube root, such as stuff like that, and their upgraded forms, cube and cube root. So that would add both variety and mathematical depth to the gameplay. However, it goes beyond the level of elementary school mathematics, which is something to be implemented in the future. And in conclusion, the question I'm addressing is how to integrate math education in a game form so that it could be compelling to all children and encourage practice. Math Night is my solution to the question. My product serves as a supplement outside the classroom that could help kids learn and practice math in a more fun environment anytime they want. Thank you for listening to me.